Hello, I'm Keith with the Trombone Shop at Schmidt Music, back with another instrument review for you. And today, I've got a model that's been out for at least a few years here, but for one reason or another, we just haven't gotten a full review done of it yet, and that is the Getzen 4047 ET Enzo Terzani large bore tenor trombone. So the 4047 and its sibling, the 4147 custom reserves, have been out for years and years. As you know, they did, a handful of years ago, they did a redesign of the 4147 Ian Bosfield model, and they applied a lot of what they learned to the ET, the 4047 as well here. So again, it's been out, it's been exceptionally well received. We just haven't gotten a review done of it, and so I'm excited to share it with you. So I'm going to go through, take a play, talk about the experience afterwards. I'm going to be playing everything today on my trusty Bach 5G. The Getzen custom reserve line has been out for, again, years and years, and specifically its models, the 4047 and 4147, originally took a lot of inspiration from the classic American trombones, right? They weren't direct, copies of these instruments, but the 4147 obviously had a lot of influence from the Conn 88H. The 4047 had a lot of influence from the Bach 42. And they were really popular models, but as Edwards and Getzen does so well, they saw the opportunity to work on to redevelop these instruments, using new technologies, new techniques that they've learned, and frankly, I think to kind of help the instrument to fit into the evolving needs of the player. So again, they applied a lot of these innovations, changes a number of years ago to the 4147 Ian Bosfield, and a few years later, they did the same thing with the 4047. I'm collaborating with the wonderful Viennese Philharmonic trombonist Enzo Terzani. They brought a lot of really, really great stuff to the table. So as I'm describing this instrument, the 4047, again, the way I kind of talk about it is, it started off as kind of at least a Bach-inspired instrument. It's very much its own thing now. So first off, what's going on with this in general? So this has an 8.5-inch, a one-piece yellow brass bell, unsoldered rim. It has a single radius seam tuning slide, so sheet brass tuning slide here, and we'll talk about what that's bringing to the table here. It has the Getzen power bore rotor with a newly redesigned rotor dome on here, which they kind of built to add some extra kind of resonance complexity to all of it. Of course, it's got their, the Edwards Getzen, famous, harmonic pillar system here, which we'll talk about. Edge bracing on the valve section. We've got a wider box style kind of hand slide here with, again, a lot of material changes that they've made within the hand slide itself. A sterling silver lead pipe, so that's something exclusive to the 4047 here as well. A yellow brass outer tubes with a yellow brass crook dual radius on the bottom of the crook there. So what's all this bringing to the table? One of the things that I think we've seen in our world in the past handful of years, I'd say especially the last, say, 6-8 years, is we are increasingly looking for instruments that are maybe a little bit more efficient. They don't necessarily need this huge amount of just kind of cannon-like airflow, but they're giving us the power. And a lot of times I think we're looking for a little bit more complexity in the sound, a little bit more denseness, a little bit more, color variations, in the overtone, spectrum that's happening. I think the 4047 does this in a really, really wonderful way. So to me, right off the bat, it is an instrument. Well, first off, it's comfortable for me as a player. We've talked about some of this here. I'm somebody who likes a setup. It's not overly big. I don't tend to respond like super well to a lot of, especially on large bore tenor axial flow setups. A rotor setup tends to work a little bit better in my approach, but having an instrument that's got some weight, some density to it to kind of balance, my airflow, which I think tends to be a little, fairly broad size, not too big, but it has some energy behind it. The 47 is one of those, I think, that does such a wonderful job of bringing and kind of balancing a lot of my playing attributes. So as a player, first off, when I go through and play, it's something where it really makes the space ring. When I go through and play, I can just hear my sound bouncing off the walls. And that's because of a lot of these, these additions here. It's an instrument that resonates, but it's got some power. It doesn't want to get overly bright and shimmery. It takes the energy, whether it's, with the bell design, the unsoldered rims, a lot of times can give us a really nice balance and help to give us a little bit more vibrancy. But I think that's balanced by, for example, the sheet brass, the seamed tuning slide. I've talked about this a little bit in the past with Shire's seamed tuning slide. For me, it's a very different blow. So for example, on the Shire's instruments, I personally, for the most part, the seamed tuning slides, and just to talk through this, what that means is instead of them taking brass tubing and drawing it to the correct diameter, taper, whatever they want, and then going through and bending it, what they're doing is they're starting off with a solid sheet of brass, and they're going through and they are rolling that and brazing it, and then they're bending it, right? And what that does is, the theory is, anyway, you end up with a much more even material thickness all the way through versus the drawing process where you can have subtle inconsistencies as the metal is stretching. So for me, for example, on the Shire's instruments, a lot of times I find the seam tuning slides to be a little bit too dense for me. I feel like they take away a little bit of the life, and I just feel like I'm pushing against it. In this case, with this design, I actually think that's helping to add to some of the weight and the density of the playing of it. That, combined with the sterling silver lead pipe, which again, for a lot of folks, I think it can be a little bit much to push around. For me, it's giving this just wonderful, wonderful stability and projection with all of this. And again, so many other places that they're playing around. Again, nobody does all of like this material resonance concept. When I talk about how instruments are built, it's really either affecting what we're changing, it's affecting airflow or resonance, and nobody does better at really playing around with and really fine-tuning all of these resonance properties than Getzen and Edwards, right? So, for example, the harmonic pillar, which we didn't really talk about. Today, I was using the the stainless steel pillar in here, right? If you're not familiar with this concept, I think I'm actually going to do another video to talk about it a little bit. Again, it's an idea that's been out for quite a while, but I think it bears going back and looking at because it really can make a difference with how the instrument performs. All the way through, I think it combines together to create an instrument that's really, really nuanced I feel like I'm able to go through, a lot of our soft legato playing. It's still connected. It's still responsive. When I'm going through and really pushing the instrument, it remains so in control. And I feel like it's giving me just the right amount of balance. I can push just enough against it where it gives me, some of the support I need, but at the same time, it's free blowing where I feel like, again, going up to like our 10th partial D, no issues at all. It's working. It's balancing for me. So it's a design that if you've got that kind of airflow, if you're looking for something with a lot of stability to it, something where if you find maybe a little bit lighter setup, something that's not quite so materially nuanced, it feels like maybe it's getting a little bit out of control. You're not getting quite the balance in the response there. The sound is maybe getting a little bit bright. It doesn't have quite the complexity you're looking for. This is an instrument that can provide a lot of that. If you find something like this, it maybe feels a little bit too heavy, dead, dull, dialing it back to something like, for example, the 4147 can be a really nice balance as well here. So it's been a favorite in the shop, and I'm glad I had a chance to share it with you. So if you have any thoughts about what I talked about, what you heard today with the 4047 ET, feel free to leave them in the comments. Maybe you have experience with this instrument. We'd love to hear about that. If you haven't already done so, consider giving a thumbs up to this video. Consider subscribing to the channel. We'd love to have you as a part of our community. And of course, you can always find the Trombone Shop on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. As always, thanks for watching.